I stepped into the mansion, the heavy wooden door creaking ominously as I pushed it open. The air was thick with dust and an unsettling silence that enveloped me like a shroud. I had been looking forward to this assignment, thinking it would be a fresh start for my photography career. Instead, it felt like stepping into a tomb, a relic of a past that I had no part in but was inexplicably drawn to. Just a house, Jake? I muttered to myself, trying to shake the unease that prickled at the back of my neck. It's just a house. Yet, as I ventured deeper into the dimly lit corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The faded wallpaper peeled away like the memories I was trying to escape, and the air was saturated with an unsettling stillness that made my heart race. I pulled out my camera, hoping the familiar weight of it would ground me. The lens clicked as I captured a few frames of the ornate staircase, its banister twisted like a gnarled tree branch. The images would be crucial for the magazine feature I was working on, but as I stared at the viewfinder, I couldn't help but feel that the house was alive, breathing in the shadows. Come on, focus. I urged myself, shaking off the feeling. I needed this job. I needed to prove to everyone, and to myself, that I could still create beauty in the world after the crushing weight of my loss. My wife, Claire, had been gone for almost a year now, and the grief had become a constant companion, whispering doubts into my ear. Every shutter click felt like a reminder of what I had lost. As I wandered through the ground floor, I felt a chill creep up my spine. The windows were covered with grime, casting a murky light across the room. I paused in front of a large, ornate mirror that hung crookedly on the wall. My reflection stared back at me, hollow and worn. Perhaps it was the stories I had heard about the mansion that unsettled me, a place steeped in tragedy and loss. I couldn't shake off the sense that the walls held secrets, that they were witnesses to something unspeakable. Great, Jake, you're losing your mind. I scoffed, but even my own voice sounded distant, echoing in the cavernous space. I turned and continued my exploration, eventually making my way to a narrow hallway lined with portraits of long-dead occupants. Their eyes seemed to follow me, filled with sorrow and something else I couldn't quite place. It was unnerving. Then I saw it, a glimmer in the corner of my eye. I whipped my head around, heart racing. Nothing, just the shadows dancing at the edges of the room. Get a grip, I muttered, yet the feeling of being observed persisted. I pressed on, determined to find something worthy of capturing. As I climbed the staircase, the wood creaked under my weight, and I felt an odd shiver run through me. The second floor was even darker, the air thick and stale. I stepped cautiously, feeling as if I were intruding upon a sacred space. The first door I opened led into what appeared to be a child's room. Faded pink wallpaper adorned with fraying floral patterns. A small bed sat in the corner, covered in a layer of dust that had settled like a blanket over years of neglect. I raised my camera, snapping a few shots of the room, but something compelled me to linger. There was a sense of loss here, a palpable sadness that tugged at my heart. I lowered the camera and walked further into the room, noticing a collection of toys scattered across the floor. A porcelain doll, its face cracked and eyes wide, seemed to stare at me with a haunting familiarity. Who used to play here? I whispered, feeling ridiculous for talking to an empty room. But a part of me was desperate to connect with whatever spirit still lingered. I could almost hear the laughter of a child echoing in my mind, mingling with the sound of my own heartbeat. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a soft giggle that sent a jolt of fear through me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. Nothing but silence answered. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as my imagination running wild. I was alone after all. I took a step back, ready to leave the room when the sudden flash of my camera caught my attention. I hadn't pressed the shutter, but the image appeared on the screen. A little girl stood in the corner, smiling at me. Her hair was dark and wavy, cascading around her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with an innocence that made my heart ache. "What the hell?" I whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. I blinked, hoping it was just a trick of the light or a reflection. But there she was, clear as day, as if she were standing right in front of me. I turned to look back at the corner, but it was empty. I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Get a grip, Jake," I said again, forcing myself to breathe. I glanced at the camera again, the image still frozen on the screen. "Maybe I need to check the settings," I mumbled, but deep down, I knew something was off. I hurried out of the room, my heart racing, and down the hall. The house creaked around me, and I could feel the weight of its history pressing down. I needed to get to the bottom of this. I needed to understand what I had just seen. As I settled into a small sitting room filled with dusty furniture, I pulled up the image of the girl once more. She looked so real, so full of life, and yet her presence felt haunting. What was her story? Why had she appeared in my photograph? I felt a surge of determination. If I could uncover the truth behind this mansion, perhaps it would help me piece together my own shattered life. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the task ahead. "All right, Emily," I said aloud, as if the name had fallen from my lips by some unseen force. "Let's figure this out." My voice echoed in the empty room, but I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. I could sense that the mansion held layers of stories, and I was determined to peel them back, one photograph at a time. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding," I muttered, clutching my camera tightly as I prepared to dive deeper into the mystery of Emily and the shadows that clung to this place. With renewed resolve, I stepped out of the sitting room, ready to capture whatever else this place had to offer. The air felt charged, as if the very walls were alive with whispers, beckoning me to uncover the truth. I was an explorer in a world where the past and present intertwined, and I wouldn't stop until I had unraveled the threads of sorrow woven into this house. The lingering sense of unease still hovered over me, but alongside it was a flicker of excitement. I was on the cusp of something significant, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that I might just find my way back to the light. As I stepped into the old mansion, a wave of frustration washed over me. The air was thick with dust, and the fading light cast eerie shadows across the wooden floors. This place was supposed to be my next big project, a chance to revitalize my career as a photographer after the tragic loss of my wife. But instead, all I felt was the weight of my grief pressing down harder with each creak of the floorboards. The grandeur of the mansion was overshadowed by the sorrow that clung to its walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. As I wandered through the dimly lit rooms, I began to notice strange details. A cracked mirror here, a cobweb-covered chandelier there. My heart raced as I felt an inexplicable presence, like a whisper in the back of my mind urging me to look deeper. I had come here to capture the beauty of decay, but instead, I felt like I was being watched, as if the house itself held secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. After setting up my camera for a trial shot, I focused on an ornate staircase that spiraled into darkness. I pressed the shutter, expecting to see nothing but the emptiness of the hallway on the LCD screen. But when I reviewed the image, my breath caught in my throat. In the background, just barely visible, was the figure of a little girl, her face illuminated by the fading light, a smile frozen in time. I hadn't seen her when I took the picture. She was like a ghost in the frame. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was she? Why hadn't I noticed her? My instincts kicked in, and I knew I had to learn more about this place and the child who had somehow appeared in my photograph. My curiosity grew alongside the unsettling feeling in my gut. I needed answers. Back at home, I dove into research, scouring the internet for any information on the mansion. I found old records and articles that told the story of a tragic fire that had claimed the life of a young girl named Emily. The details were sparse, but it was clear that the tragedy had left a deep scar on the family who once lived there. I couldn't help but feel a connection to her story, a resonance that tugged at my heartstrings. As I read through each piece of information, I learned that Emily had been just 7 years old when she died in the flames, her laughter extinguished too soon. I imagined her playing in the rooms I had just walked through, her spirit forever etched in the fabric of the walls. The report spoke of the family's devastation, how they had never truly recovered from their loss. But the cause of the fire remained shrouded in mystery, an unanswered question that gnawed at me. I found myself drawn to the small cemetery where Emily was buried. As I stood before her grave, a sense of calm washed over me, mingling with my sorrow. The headstone was adorned with flowers, and I could see that someone still cared. Kneeling down, I placed my hand on the cold stone, feeling an inexplicable connection. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to. Emily, her family, or even myself. The stories I had uncovered echoed in my mind, intertwining with my own grief. I was haunted by memories of my wife, gone too soon, and I could not help but wonder if Emily's spirit was reaching out to me, urging me to understand her story. There was something unfinished about her life, and I felt compelled to uncover the truth, not just for her sake, but for my own healing. The next day, I returned to the mansion, feeling a mix of determination and trepidation. I needed to find Sarah, Emily's sister, who still lived in the house. Perhaps she could provide further insight into the tragedy that had befallen her family. As I entered the mansion once more, the air felt charged, heavy with the weight of history and loss. When I finally met Sarah, I was struck by the aura of sadness that surrounded her. She seemed to carry the burden of her family's past as if it were an anchor weighing her down. "I know you've come to photograph the house," she said softly, her eyes reflecting a deep well of sorrow. "But it's more than just a building to me. It's a reminder of everything we've lost." "I'm Jake," I introduced myself, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been researching Emily. I want to understand what happened." Her gaze hardened for a moment, as if she were bracing herself for the memories that would flood back. "Emily was special," she began, her voice trembling. "She was full of life, always laughing and playing. But after the fire, everything changed. We were never the same." "What do you remember about the night of the fire?" I asked gently, hoping to coax out the details that had remained buried for so long. Sarah hesitated, her brow furrowing in thought. "There were strange things happening before the fire. Emily had an imaginary friend, someone she called Lily. I always thought it was just a phase, but sometimes I wonder if it was something more." "Lily," I repeated, feeling a chill run down my spine. The name echoed in my mind, intertwining with the unsettling feeling that had haunted me since I first captured Emily's image. "Yes," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Emily talked about her all the time. She said Lily was always there watching over her. But after the fire, I never heard her mention Lily again." The pieces began to fall into place. I felt a deep sense of foreboding, as if I were standing at the edge of a dark abyss. "Do you think Lily could have had something to do with the fire?" I ventured cautiously. "I don't know," Sarah replied, shaking her head. "It all feels so confusing. I was just a child, and I was grieving. I never really understood what was happening." I could see the pain etched across her face, a reminder of the scars left behind. "Maybe we should try to remember together," I suggested, an idea forming in my mind. "Would you be willing to join me for a photo session? Maybe having you there will help me capture something more." She looked hesitant but nodded slowly. "I can try, but I can't promise anything. Emily's memory is fragile, and I don't know if I'm ready to face it again." As we prepared for the session, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of uncovering something profound. I set up my camera in the main hall, the sunlight filtering in through the dusty windows, casting a warm glow on the faded furniture. Sarah stood beside me, her expression a mix of hope and trepidation. "Just remember," I said, trying to reassure her, "we are here to honor her memory, to bring light to the darkness." As I clicked the shutter, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a sense of anticipation building. But when I reviewed the images, my heart sank. There, once again, was Emily, this time closer to the foreground, her smile replaced by a sorrowful gaze. It was as if she were pleading for help, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice wavering. "She's different." Sarah leaned in to look at the screen, her eyes widening in shock. "I didn't see her when we were taking the photos. It's like she knew we were here. The air grew thick with tension as we exchanged glances, unspoken fears lingering between us. What if she's trying to tell us something? I mused, my thoughts spiraling. What if this is connected to the fire? As we spoke, a storm brewed outside, dark clouds rolling in and casting shadows across the room. I felt an inexplicable urge to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the tragedy that had shattered Sarah's family. "Sarah," I said, my voice firm with resolve, "we have to investigate further. There are too many unanswered questions. Maybe we can find something that will help us understand what really happened that night." She hesitated before nodding, a flicker of determination igniting within her. "Okay, let's do it. For Emily." Together, we set out to explore the mansion once more, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within its walls. Our journey had only just begun, and as we ventured into the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was guiding us, her spirit intertwined with our quest for truth. As I stepped into the dimly lit corridors of the old mansion, a chill ran down my spine. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the creaking floorboards beneath my feet whispered secrets of a bygone era. I had come here, lured by the promise of photographs that might revive my stagnant career, but instead, I found myself grappling with the shadows of my own grief. It had been months since I lost her, my wife, and the weight of that luto felt like a suffocating fog, clouding my vision and stifling my creativity. "Just focus on the shots," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the creeping unease that settled in my chest. Yet, every corner I turned seemed to echo with memories, both mine and those that lingered in this forsaken place. The mansion felt alive, breathing, as if it held a pulse that resonated with my heartache. I paused, letting my camera dangle from my neck, while I took in the peeling wallpaper and the dust motes dancing in the slivers of light. As I prepared for the first photo shoot, a strange sensation washed over me, an inexplicable presence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I raised my camera, framing my shots with a practiced eye, but part of me was distracted, caught in the web of my own sorrow. I pressed the shutter, capturing the haunting beauty of this place, while the other part of me longed for the comfort of my wife's laughter, her warmth. During what was supposed to be a straightforward session, I glanced at the camera's display, and my breath hitched in my throat. There, in the background of one of the frames, stood a little girl with a wide, innocent grin. She was ethereal, almost glowing against the somber hues of the mansion. Yet in the moment of shooting, I had seen nothing, no child, no presence, just the desolation of the house. I quickly flipped through the images, but there was no mistaking it. The girl was there, smiling, a specter from the past. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, a blend of intrigue and dread. "Who are you?" I whispered to the empty room, half expecting an answer. Instead, I was met with silence, the kind that pressed heavily against my ears, amplifying my own heartbeat. I knew I had to investigate. This photograph was more than just an anomaly. It felt like a calling, a thread leading deeper into the mansion's history. Later, I plunged into research, tracing the mansion's lineage through old newspaper articles and archives. The name Emily kept surfacing, a little girl who had tragically perished in a fire many years ago. My heart ached at the thought of her lost potential, her laughter extinguished too soon. As I read more about the incident, a sickening sense of curiosity gnawed at me. Why had her life ended in flames? What had happened to her family in the aftermath? The more I uncovered, the more I felt connected to Emily, as if her spirit was reaching out from the pages of history. I learned of the heartache that followed her death, a family shattered, left to wander through the echoes of their memories, haunted by an absence that could never be filled. I needed to know more, to understand the tragedy that hung over this house like a dark cloud. Driven by an inexplicable urge, I found myself standing before Emily's grave a few days later. The cemetery was overgrown, a neglected patch of earth that mirrored the sadness of the story I had unearthed. I knelt before the headstone, tracing the engraved letters with my fingertip. It felt surreal, as if I were crossing a boundary between the living and the dead. "Emily," I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what happened to you, but I want to help. I want to know the truth." As I sat there, surrounded by silence, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. I closed my eyes, feeling an odd sense of tranquility wash over me. It was in that moment of vulnerability that I sensed I was not alone. I opened my eyes and looked around, half expecting to see the little girl from my photograph, but there was nothing, only shadows stretching long in the fading light. Days passed, and I found myself drawn back to the mansion, this time with a purpose that transcended my work as a photographer. I wanted answers, and I would stop at nothing to uncover the truth behind Emily's story. It was then that I met Sarah, the sister of Emily, who lived in the mansion, a ghost in her own right, tethered to the past by grief. Sarah was a striking woman, though her beauty was marred by the weight of sorrow she carried. When I introduced myself, I could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes, as if she, too, had been waiting for someone to acknowledge the pain that had enveloped their family. "Emily was my little sister," Sarah said, her voice a soft melody tinged with melancholy. "We never recovered from the loss. It's like a part of us is missing." "How long have you lived here?" I asked, my heart aching for her. "Since the fire," she replied, her gaze drifting to the window, where the sunlight filtered through the grime. "This house was our home, but it feels more like a prison now." As we spoke, I was struck by the depth of her sadness. It was palpable, a heavy fog that filled the room. I couldn't help but feel a strange connection to her, both of us bound by our respective losses. I took a chance, hoping that perhaps together we could find answers. "Sarah, did Emily ever mention an imaginary friend?" I asked, recalling the little girl in my photographs. Her expression shifted, a flicker of surprise igniting in her eyes. "Yes, she had a friend named Lily. She was always with Emily, especially before the incident. But Lily wasn't just a friend. She was different." "What do you mean?" I urged, leaning in closer. "She had a dark side," Sarah confessed, her voice trembling. "Sometimes I felt like Emily was more connected to Lily than to us. They had their own world, and I was an outsider." I felt a chill as I processed her words. "Do you think Lily had anything to do with the fire?" Sarah hesitated, biting her lip. "I don't know, but I always had a feeling that Lily wasn't just a figment of Emily's imagination. There was something unsettling about her." The more we talked, the more I sensed a thread of darkness intertwined with the tragic tale. It felt imperative to invite Sarah to a photo session. Perhaps her presence could help me uncover more about Emily and Lily, guiding me deeper into the mystery that had ensnared my heart. "Would you be willing to join me for a session?" I asked, a tentative hope blossoming within me. "I think it could help us both." She looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of determination in her eyes. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steadier now. "Maybe it's time we confront the past." As we prepared for the session, I could feel the weight of our shared grief pressing down on us. Together, we stepped into the mansion's eerie embrace, ready to face whatever shadows awaited us. I was determined to capture more than just images. I wanted to uncover the truth, to give voice to the silence that had haunted both Sarah and me for far too long. The air in the mansion was thick with nostalgia and dust, a palpable weight that clung to me as I wandered through the cavernous hallways. My camera dangled from my neck, a familiar companion, though it felt more like a burden today. The shadows cast by the late afternoon sun danced across the faded wallpaper, revealing the remnants of a once vibrant home now lost to time. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched, and it frustrated me. My career had been a series of missed shots and faded memories since the day I lost her. The locket around my neck, a reminder of my late wife, felt like an anchor tying me to the past, and I was desperate to break free. "Focus, Jake," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the melancholy that threatened to engulf me. I aimed my camera at the grand staircase, its banister intricately carved, and pressed the shutter. The click echoed like a heartbeat in the silence, but it did little to soothe my frayed nerves. I stepped deeper into the house, each creak of the floorboards stirring a distant echo of laughter and warmth that had long since faded. Hours passed as I explored room after room, each one filled with remnants of lives once lived. Yet it was in the nursery that I felt the chill run down my spine. A child's room, untouched by time, filled with toys and books that seemed to whisper secrets of a tragic past. I raised my camera again, the shutter clicking softly as I captured the innocence of the space. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye in the corner of the frame. I lowered my camera, scanning the room, but found nothing, just a lingering unease. Later, as I reviewed the photos on my camera, my heart raced when I noticed something peculiar in one of the shots. There, in the background, was a little girl, her smile bright yet haunting, standing just beyond the doorway. I hadn't seen her with my own eyes. A chill crept up my spine, and I felt the urge to look away, but something compelled me to keep staring. Who was she? Emily? I whispered, the name tumbling from my lips as I remembered snippets of the history I had read. The girl who had perished in a tragic fire, leaving behind nothing but sorrow and unanswered questions. The connection was undeniable, and my curiosity ignited like a match struck against the dark. I had to know more. The next day, I dove into research, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I sought out every detail I could find about the mansion and its tragic past. The story unfolded like a dark fairy tale, revealing the innocence of a little girl whose life had been cut short. Emily had become a ghost in the eyes of the living, a victim of an incident that had left her family shattered. The fire that consumed the mansion was said to have been an accident, but the details were vague, and I sensed something darker lurking beneath the surface. I felt an inexplicable pull to visit her grave, a need to connect with the child whose image had so unervingly appeared in my photo. The cemetery was quiet, the only sound being the rustling leaves overhead. As I knelt by her gravestone, I could almost hear the whispers of the past. "I'm sorry," I murmured, placing a hand on the cold stone. "I want to help you find peace." It was then that I met Sarah, Emily's sister, who still lived in the mansion that had once been their home. She was ethereal, with an aura of sadness that seemed to envelop her like a shroud. Her eyes held the weight of 1,000 unshed tears, and I could sense she was still grappling with the loss. As we spoke, she recounted memories of their childhood, her voice trembling with emotion. "Emily was always so full of life," Sarah said, her gaze distant as she reminisced. "She had an imaginary friend, someone she believed was always watching over her. I never understood it, but I think that friend was different." "Different how?" I asked, my interest piqued. The more I learned, the more I felt drawn into their story. "She was dark," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I remember Emily talking about her, but she always seemed so happy. I never thought much of it until the fire. After that, everything changed." As Sarah shared her memories, I felt a strange sense of urgency to capture her essence through my lens. "Would you be willing to do a photo shoot with me?" I asked tentatively. "I believe your presence might help bring something to light about Emily. Maybe we can uncover the truth together." She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "You really think it would help?" "I do," I replied, hoping to reassure her. "Sometimes, the camera can capture things we can't see with our eyes, things hidden in the shadows." The day of the photo shoot arrived, and the atmosphere in the mansion felt charged, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I set up my equipment in the nursery, the sunlight filtering through the dusty windows casting a warm glow. Sarah stood in front of me, her expression a mixture of apprehension and hope. As I clicked the shutter, capturing her likeness amid the remnants of her sister's childhood, I felt a presence stir in the room. The temperature dropped, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was watching us. My heart raced as I took another shot, the camera capturing the moment forever. But when I reviewed the images, my breath caught in my throat. There she was again. Emily, this time much closer, her smile replaced by an expression of deep sadness. It was as if she were pleading for help, and the weight of her gaze bore down on me. "Jake, are you all right?" Sarah asked, concern etching her features as she noticed my reaction. "Yeah, there's something off about these photos," I stammered, my mind racing. "We need to talk about what happened to her. We can't just ignore it." As we sat together, poring over the photographs, I felt the tension build between us. What if the fire wasn't an accident? I suggested, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. What if someone said it deliberately? Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "You think that could be true? I've heard whispers about our neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He's always been strange. Some say he blames us for the fire. Maybe we should visit him," I said, the idea taking root in my mind. He might know something. With a mix of trepidation and determination, we made our way to Mr. Henderson's house, each step heavy with the weight of our quest for truth. The old man was a recluse, and I could feel the tension crackle in the air as we approached his front door. When we knocked, the door creaked open, revealing a man with wild hair and sunken eyes. "What do you want?" he barked, suspicion lacing his voice. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Mr. Henderson, we're here about Emily. We believe you might know something about the fire." His expression hardened, and for a moment, I thought he might slam the door in our faces. But then, something shifted in his gaze as he caught sight of Sarah. "Emily's sister, huh?" he muttered, a hint of something almost like regret flickering in his eyes. "We're just trying to understand what happened," I pressed, sensing that we had to push through his defenses. "Anything you can share would help us." He hesitated, the lines on his face deepening as he scrutinized us. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing us entry. The inside of his home was cluttered and dim, the air thick with the smell of dust and neglect. My eyes were drawn to a box in the corner, old photographs stacked haphazardly. "Look at those if you must," he said gruffly, waving a hand dismissively. "But don't expect any answers from me." As I rifled through the photographs, my heart raced when I stumbled upon one that made my stomach drop. It was an image of Emily, her innocent smile shining brightly, but beside her stood a shadowy figure. The likeness was strikingly similar to the girl from my photos. "Do you see this?" I turned to Sarah, my voice a mix of excitement and fear. "This girl. She looks like the one who's been appearing in my shots." Henderson's gaze flickered with something. Was it recognition? "That's her friend," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. But that friend was never just a friend. I exchanged a glance with Sarah, a silent understanding passing between us. We were on the brink of uncovering something monumental, a truth that had been buried along with Emily. "Mr. Henderson," I pressed, "what do you know about the fire? Was it truly an accident?" His eyes darted around the room as if he were searching for the right words. "It was the girl," he finally said, his voice shaking. "The friend. She was always there, always watching. And then, one night I saw her, and the flames, they came after her." As he spoke, I felt the walls of the house closing in around me. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture remained obscured by shadows. I needed to know more, and I could feel the urgency gnawing at me. Whatever had happened to Emily was tied to something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. As I stood in the dimly lit hallway of the old mansion, frustration clawed at my insides. This place, with its peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards, was supposed to be my next big photographic project, the one that could help rejuvenate my career. But all I felt was the overwhelming weight of my grief. It had been a year since my wife passed away, and ever since that day, my life had been a haze of sorrow and missed opportunities. The camera in my hands felt heavier than it ever had, a constant reminder of what I had lost. As I explored the mansion, the air around me felt thick, almost electric. I glanced around, half expecting to see a ghostly figure emerge from the shadows, but nothing appeared. Yet, there was something unsettling about the silence, an unshakable feeling that I wasn't alone. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought as mere imagination. After all, I was here to capture the essence of this place, not to let my mind wander off into the realm of the supernatural. With a deep breath, I set up my camera in the grand living room, a space filled with dust and memories. I clicked the shutter repeatedly, trying to find the right angle, the right light. Then, as I reviewed the photos on my camera, I stumbled upon something that made my heart race. In the background of one of the shots, a small girl with a bright smile stood, her laughter seemingly suspended in the air. But when I looked up, there was no one there. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know who she was, but her presence in the photograph sent a shiver of unease through me. "Who are you?" I whispered to the empty room, as if the walls might answer back. The image lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder that there was something deeper hidden within this mansion. I needed to know more about this girl, about why she had appeared in my photograph. Determined to uncover the truth, I began researching the history of the mansion. It didn't take long for me to stumble upon the tragic tale of Emily, a young girl who had died in a fire that consumed the house years ago. The details were scarce, but the sadness radiated from the records I found. Emily's family had been shattered by the loss, and the town whispered about the mysterious cause of the fire. As I pieced together the fragments of Emily's story, an inexplicable connection formed within me. I felt drawn to her, as if her spirit was calling out for someone to remember her. I made my way to the cemetery where she was buried, the weight of my camera heavy on my shoulder. Standing before her grave, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, mixed with an overwhelming sadness. It was as if I could hear her laughter echoing through the trees that surrounded the gravesite. Days later, I met Sarah, Emily's sister, who still lived in the mansion. Her eyes were filled with a deep sorrow that seemed to mirror my own. As she spoke about Emily, her voice trembled with the weight of their shared history. "We never really recovered from losing her," Sarah admitted, her gaze distant. "It was as if the light in our family went out that day." Intrigued, I asked her about Emily's childhood. "She had an imaginary friend," Sarah revealed, a hint of sadness in her smile. "They were inseparable, especially before the fire." I felt a surge of curiosity. What was her friend like? I probed, wanting to understand what might have influenced Emily's life before the tragedy struck. Sarah hesitated for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "She was different, not like the usual imaginary friends. I sometimes wondered if Emily's friend was real or something else entirely." Those words echoed in my mind. Perhaps this friend had been involved in Emily's tragic fate, a dark shadow lurking in the corners of her innocent world. I thought about inviting Sarah to a photography session, hoping that her presence would help shed light on the mystery surrounding Emily. The day of the shoot arrived, and I set up my equipment in the same living room where I had first encountered Emily's image. As I clicked the shutter, I felt a strange energy in the air. Then it happened again. There she was, Emily, standing closer this time, her expression tinged with sadness. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Why was she looking at me like that? "What did you capture?" Sarah asked, peering at the camera's screen. I hesitated, unsure if I should show her, but I needed to share this unsettling moment. "Look," I said, turning the camera toward her. Her breath caught in her throat as she gazed at the image. "That's Emily," she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "But why is she here? What does she want?" We began discussing the possible causes of the fire, the theories swirling around like fog in my mind. "I've heard stories about our neighbor, Mr. Henderson," Sarah said, her brow furrowing. "He always seemed strange. Some people think he had something to do with it." The thought sent chills down my spine. "We should investigate," I suggested, a mix of dread and anticipation coursing through me. Maybe he knows something that could help us understand what happened that night. The next day, we approached Mr. Henderson's home, a dilapidated structure that seemed to sag under the weight of its own secrets. As we knocked on the door, I felt my heart race. The door creaked open, revealing a man whose eyes were clouded with suspicion. "What do you want?" he barked, his voice gruff and unwelcoming. "We're here to ask about the fire," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "We believe you might know something about it." His demeanor shifted slightly, but he remained guarded. I don't have time for this, he snapped, about to shut the door. Please, I interjected, desperate. We just want to understand what happened to Emily. He hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing us to enter. The interior was dark and cluttered, filled with old furniture and dust-covered trinkets. Felt like stepping into a time capsule. My eyes were drawn to a dusty box in the corner, partially hidden beneath a pile of newspapers. What's in that box? Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. I don't know, Mr. Henderson grumbled, but I could see the flicker of interest in his eyes. We approached the box cautiously, and as I opened it, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. Inside were old photographs, faded but still capturing moments of joy. My breath hitched when I found a picture of Emily with her imaginary friend. The girl in the photo looked strikingly similar to the spirit I had seen in my images. Do you see this? I asked, holding it up for Sarah and Mr. Henderson to see. This is her friend. The old man's expression shifted, shadows of memories crossing his face. She had a friend, he murmured, almost to himself. But there was something off about her. What do you mean? I pressed, sensing that we were on the brink of discovering something significant. Mr. Henderson's gaze grew distant, and his voice trembled as he began to recount a fragmented story about the night of the fire. It was chaos. I saw her, the girl with Emily. She was there, but I couldn't understand what she was doing. Something felt wrong, but I was too late. As he spoke, I could see the pain etched in his features, but his words were tangled, lacking clarity. It was as if he were grappling with his own memories, fighting to piece together the truth. Do you remember anything specific? I urged, feeling the urgency of the moment. Anything that could help us? But before he could respond, his expression shifted once more, confusion clouding his eyes. I'm not sure. It was all too fast. The flames, they took everything. Frustration bubbled within me. I could sense that we were close to a revelation, but the more I probed, the more fragmented his recollection became. I glanced at Sarah, who was watching intently, her face a mixture of concern and empathy for the tortured man before us. We need to go, I said finally, feeling the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on us. We'll find the truth one way or another. As we stepped back into the sunlight, I felt an unsettling mixture of hope and dread. The pieces of Emily's story were starting to come together, but the shadows were deepening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something sinister lurking just beneath the surface. As the evening shadows stretched across the creaking floors of the old mansion, I found myself sinking into a whirlpool of confusion and dread. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. As I made my way through the dimly lit corridors, a camera slung over my shoulder. I had been drawn here, almost magnetically, to uncover the truth behind the tragic fate of Emily, the little girl whose image haunted my lens. Each click of the shutter echoed in my mind, but instead of capturing beauty or nostalgia, I felt as though I was documenting a descent into madness. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned in the small bed I had rented in the nearby inn. The whispers of the mansions passed swirling in my head like the restless wind outside. My dreams were invaded by visions of Emily, her innocent face morphing into something darker, something that sent shivers down my spine. I could hear her laughter, but it was tinged with an underlying sorrow that pierced my heart. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow. Jake, wake up! I jolted awake, startled by the sound of my own voice calling out in the dark. I glanced around the room, my heart racing. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second echoing in the silence. I could still hear her voice, her laughter, sweet, yet haunting. Was it a dream or something more? With a sense of urgency, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and stood up, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. I needed answers, and the mansion felt like the only place to find them. I dressed quickly, my mind racing with thoughts of Emily and the shadowy figure that had begun to haunt my dreams. Arriving at the mansion, I was greeted by an eerie stillness. The sunlight barely penetrated the thick curtains that hung in the windows, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the walls. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the sensation of being watched. The house seemed alive, its very walls filled with stories begging to be told. Maybe it's just the atmosphere, I muttered to myself, trying to dismiss the feeling of dread creeping up my spine. I pulled out my camera, the familiar weight providing a sense of comfort. "Let's just get some shots," I said aloud, as if the act of photographing could chase away my fears. As I roamed the halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was watching me, her presence lingering in the air. I glanced at the family portraits hanging on the walls, their eyes seeming to follow me. My heart raced as I turned a corner and came face to face with a large, ornate mirror. For a brief moment, I thought I saw her reflection behind me. Her small frame dressed in a white dress, a gentle smile playing on her lips. I spun around, but there was nothing there, only the empty hallway stretching into darkness. "Get a grip, Jake," I whispered to myself, shaking my head. "You're just imagining things." But deep down, I knew that there was something more, something I needed to confront. The day turned into night, and the shadows grew longer, enveloping the mansion in an inky blackness. I set up my camera in the drawing room, the fireplace cold and lifeless. I felt an inexplicable pull to capture the essence of this place, to uncover the secrets hidden within its walls. I adjusted the lens, focusing on the empty space, and pressed the shutter. The flash illuminated the room for a split second, and when the light faded, I felt a chill sweep through the air. Suddenly, I was overwhelmed by a wave of emotions: grief, fear, and an unshakable sense of longing. I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my throat. "What is happening to me?" I murmured, clutching my camera like a lifeline. I decided to review the images I had taken. As I scrolled through the photographs, my heart skipped a beat when I saw her. A small figure in the background of one shot, barely visible but unmistakably there. Emily. She was smiling, her eyes sparkling with a joy that contrasted sharply with the darkness surrounding her. I hadn't seen her while I was photographing, but here she was, captured forever in a moment I couldn't quite comprehend. "What the hell?" I breathed, my pulse racing. I stared at the image, unable to shake the feeling that it was more than just a trick of the light. "Why can't I see you?" I whispered, feeling a strange connection to the girl in the photograph. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "Maybe it's time to dig deeper," I told myself, my voice echoing in the empty room. I had to understand who she was and why she was haunting me. I needed to know what had happened to her, and I was willing to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. The next day, I returned to the mansion, determined to uncover the truth behind Emily's tragic fate. I combed through the dusty old bookshelves, searching for anything that could provide insight into her life and the circumstances surrounding her death. As I sifted through the forgotten remnants of the past, I stumbled upon an old newspaper clipping tucked away in a leather-bound book. "Local girl dies in tragic fire," the headline read. My heart sank as I read the details of the incident. The words blurring as tears filled my eyes. Emily had perished in a fire that consumed the mansion years ago, leaving her family shattered and broken. The article mentioned her sister, Sarah, who had been left to pick up the pieces of a life forever altered by loss. "No," I whispered, my heart aching for the little girl who had been taken too soon. I felt a surge of determination rising within me. I had to find Sarah. Perhaps she held the key to understanding the darkness that seemed to envelop Emily's spirit. I made my way to the cemetery, my heart heavy with the weight of sorrow. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and I could feel the presence of the past all around me. As I approached Emily's grave, a chill ran down my spine. The headstone was unassuming, but the name etched into the stone sent a wave of grief crashing over me. "Emily?" I breathed, kneeling before the grave. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you." I reached out, brushing my fingers over the cold stone, hoping to connect with her spirit. "I need to know the truth. I need to help you find peace." Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me, and I turned to find a woman standing there, her face shadowed by the brim of her hat. "You're here for Emily, aren't you?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes," I replied, my heart racing. "I'm Jake. I'm trying to understand what happened. I saw her in my photographs." The woman stepped closer, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice trembling. "Emily was my sister." As we spoke, I felt a connection forming between us, a shared understanding of the pain that had shaped our lives. I shared my experiences, the photographs, and the unsettling feeling of Emily's presence. Sarah listened intently, her expression shifting from sorrow to curiosity. "I've always felt Emily around me," she admitted, her gaze drifting toward the grave. "But after the fire, it became more intense. I thought I was losing my mind." "You're not alone," I reassured her. "I've been experiencing strange visions and nightmares. I think there's something connected to Emily that we need to uncover." Sarah's eyes widened as she nodded slowly, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "Maybe if we work together, we can find out what really happened that night." As we stood together in the cemetery, surrounded by the echoes of the past, I knew that we were about to embark on a journey that would test our courage and unravel the mysteries of the mansion. The darkness loomed ahead, but I was determined to confront it. I could feel Emily's spirit urging us forward, guiding us toward the truth. "I won't let her story fade away," I vowed, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. "We'll find out what happened to Emily, no matter what it takes." Sarah smiled, her expression a mix of sorrow and determination. "Together, we'll bring her the peace she deserves." As we turned to leave the cemetery, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for us in the shadows, something that would change everything. As I stepped into the mansion that had become both a refuge and a prison for my thoughts, I was immediately engulfed by a wave of cold air that seemed to seep from the very walls. The atmosphere was thick with an unsettling energy, the kind that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was as if the house held its breath, waiting for something to happen. I had come back to confront the memories that were swirling around in my mind, but now doubt began to creep in. Was I really prepared for what I might find here? The dust danced in the thin rays of sunlight filtering through the grimy windows, and I felt an almost eerie sense of familiarity wash over me. I had been here before, wandering through its rooms, feeling the weight of its history. Yet today, something felt different. There was a sensation of urgency in the air, a call that I couldn't quite place. I tightened my grip on my camera, its cold metal grounding me in reality, even as the world around me began to feel like a dream. I moved through the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the creaky wooden floor. The portraits that lined the walls seemed to watch me, their painted eyes following my every movement. I stopped in front of one, an old picture of a family, their expressions frozen in time. I couldn't help but wonder how many stories were trapped within these walls, how many lives had intersected and unraveled in this very place. As I turned to enter the living room, I was struck by an overwhelming chill. The temperature had dropped noticeably, and I could see my breath forming small clouds in front of me. "Emily?" I whispered, half expecting her spirit to emerge from the shadows. The name felt foreign on my tongue, yet I had become so entangled in her story, it was as if she had become a part of me. I moved cautiously, searching for anything that might provide clarity about the girl I had seen in my photographs. I could hardly shake the image of her smiling face, innocent yet haunting. I approached a door at the end of the hall that I had never noticed before. The wood looked worn and aged, as if it had been untouched for years. My heart raced as I reached for the knob, the cold metal sending a shiver down my spine. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice barely breaking the silence. There was no answer, just the soft creaking of the house settling, a reminder of its age. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. It swung wide, revealing a room cloaked in darkness. I stepped inside, my pulse quickening. The air felt thick, suffocating almost, and I instinctively raised my camera, flicking on the flash. The sudden burst of light illuminated the room, revealing a scene that made my heart sink. Scattered across the floor were old toys, dusty and forgotten. A A small doll lay face down, its glassy eyes staring blankly at the floor, while a tiny wooden horse rested against the wall, its paint chipped and faded. "What happened here?" I muttered, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. I knelt down, picking up the doll and turning it over in my hands. "Did Emily play with you?" I wondered aloud. I could almost hear the faint echoes of laughter in my mind, a ghostly reminder of happier times. As I continued to explore the room, I noticed a small desk in the corner, its surface cluttered with papers and knickknacks. I approached it cautiously, my curiosity piqued. Among the debris, something caught my eye, a small leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and worn. My heart raced as I picked it up, feeling the weight of its potential secrets. I opened the diary, the pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was delicate, almost childlike, and I felt an immediate connection to the words. "Today, I played with my friend in the garden. She said she could see the stars even when it's daytime." I read aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. I flipped through the pages, each entry revealing snippets of Emily's life. She wrote about playing hide and seek, drawing pictures, and her secret adventures. But as I continued to read, the tone shifted. "I'm scared," one entry read. "She says we can go away together, but I don't want to leave Mama and Papa." A chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't help but feel that these words were a warning. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence, a faint whisper that seemed to echo off the walls. "Jake?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was as if the house itself was calling my name, beckoning me deeper into its secrets. "Emily?" I called out hesitantly, the name tasting bitter on my lips. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "There's nothing to be afraid of," I reassured myself, but the truth was, fear gripped me tightly. What if I was not meant to find the answers I sought? What if Emily's story was better left untold? As I turned to leave the room, something caught my eye. A small box on the shelf, covered in dust. Drawn by an inexplicable force, I reached for it, the sensation almost magnetic. I brushed off the dust and opened it, revealing a collection of trinkets. A locket, a hairpin, and a small, intricately carved wooden figure. "Who are you?" I asked the figure aloud, feeling ridiculous but unable to help myself. I lifted it closer to my face, examining the craftsmanship. It was a girl, her features eerily similar to the girl I had seen in my photographs. "Is this you, Emily?" I murmured, my breath catching in my throat. Suddenly, the air shifted again, more dramatically this time. I felt a presence behind me, a weight pressing down on my shoulders. "Jake!" The whisper returned, closer now. I spun around, my heart racing. "Who's there?" I shouted, panic rising within me. There was silence, and then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a child's laughter, echoing through the darkness. It was sweet yet tinged with an undercurrent of sadness. "Emily?" I called out again, my voice trembling. "Is that you?" The laughter faded, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. I felt a tug at my heart, an ache that I couldn't quite explain. I was drawn back to the diary, the entries haunting me. "She was scared?" I whispered, realizing that Emily had been trapped in her own world of fear and confusion, much like I was now. I glanced back at the desk, my mind racing. What if I could help her? I thought, the idea igniting a flicker of hope within me. But how could I help a child who had been gone for so long? I needed answers. I had to know more about the friend Emily had written about, the one who seemed to hold such power over her. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I had to confront whatever darkness lingered here, whatever shadows were still haunting this place. With newfound determination, I stepped out of the room, the diary clutched tightly in my hand. I would find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As I walked back down the hall, the house felt alive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to uncover its secrets. "Just a little more," I whispered to myself, my heart racing with anticipation. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to unravel the story of Emily and her friend. the friend who might have been more than just a figment of a child's imagination. The pull of the unknown was too strong to resist. I had come here seeking redemption, but perhaps, in my quest, I would find something far more significant, an understanding of loss, of love, and the haunting pain of letting go. The storm was brewing outside, the wind howling like a mournful spirit, and I felt an inexplicable pull towards the mansion once more. As I stood at the threshold, the old wooden door creaked open, inviting me in like a siren's call. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp wood and forgotten memories. I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing as I recalled the chilling revelations from Emily's diary. I had to confront whatever was haunting this place, and perhaps confront my own demons as well. "Jake, are you sure about this?" I heard Sarah's voice echoing in my mind. Her face had been pale, eyes wide with fear when I told her I would return alone. "It's not safe. You don't know what you might find in there." I had brushed off her concerns, but deep down, I was wrestling with doubt. Still, I couldn't shake off the feeling that Emily was calling me, that she was in danger. "I have to do this," I whispered to myself, stepping cautiously into the dimly lit hall. The shadows danced along the walls, and the atmosphere seemed charged, as if the house itself was alive, breathing with a silent awareness. As I moved deeper into the mansion, I felt a chill run down my spine. My breath came out in visible puffs, and I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to ward off the cold. It was as if the very essence of despair lingered in the air. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoed like a heartbeat, and with each step, I felt the weight of the house bearing down on me. I made my way to the living room, the place where I had first sensed Emily's presence. The room was dark, with only a sliver of moonlight filtering through the dusty windows, casting eerie shadows that twisted and turned with every gust of wind. I reached for my camera, the familiar weight reassuring in my hands. "This will help me see," I muttered, raising it to my eye. I focused on the corners of the room, hoping to capture something, anything, that might shed light on the mystery surrounding Emily and her friend. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper. It was so soft that I thought I might have imagined it. "Emily," I called out, my voice trembling. "Are you here?" The stillness that followed was suffocating, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I was alone, yet not alone. As I lowered the camera, I noticed a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. I turned, heart racing, but found nothing. "Get a grip, Jake," I scolded myself. I was searching for answers, not ghosts. But deep down, I knew that the line between the two was blurring. I proceeded to the staircase, its wooden steps worn and creaky beneath my weight. Each step felt like an echo of the past, and I imagined Emily's small feet running up and down, laughter filling the air. But the laughter was gone now, replaced by silence and sorrow. I gripped the banister tightly, feeling the cold wood beneath my fingers. As I reached the second floor, a sudden gust of wind slammed a door at the end of the hallway shut. I flinched, my heart pounding wildly. What was that? I whispered to myself, inching cautiously towards the door. The air was electrified, and I could feel my skin prickling as I approached. I pushed the door open, half expecting to find nothing but emptiness. Instead, I was met with a room filled with toys, dolls, stuffed animals, and a small table with crayons scattered about. This must have been Emily's playroom. The sight tugged at my heartstrings, and I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. "What happened to you, Emily?" I murmured, stepping inside. As I moved deeper into the room, the air shifted. It grew colder, and I could almost feel a presence beside me, watching. "You're not alone here, are you?" I spoke softly, half hoping for a response. The toys remained silent, but I sensed an energy, a weight in the air that was almost palpable. Suddenly, I heard Sarah's voice again in my mind, warning me about the entity that had been linked to Emily. The imaginary friend. She wasn't just a figment of Emily's imagination. "There's something dark about her," Sarah had said, her voice laced with fear. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the chilling thought. "No, that's not possible. It's just a story. Just a story." I repeated, but the doubt lingered. As I stood in the playroom, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. I was no longer just a photographer. I was a participant in this haunting narrative. I raised my camera again, hoping to capture the innocence that once filled this room. As I clicked the shutter, the flash illuminated the space, momentarily banishing the shadows. In that brief instant, I thought I saw a figure. A small girl standing in the corner, her eyes wide and filled with a profound sadness. I blinked, and she was gone. "Emily," I called out, my voice trembling. The room fell silent, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. I needed to find Sarah. I needed to understand the connection between Emily and her friend. "Where are you, Sarah?" I whispered, almost pleading. "I need you." Just then, the temperature dropped again, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. It was as if the house itself was warning me to leave, but I couldn't. I had come too far. I needed to confront whatever darkness lingered here. I turned back towards the hallway, but as I did, I felt an icy breath on my neck. "No, no, no," I gasped, spinning around. There, at the edge of the shadows, was a figure. A small girl with long hair, her face obscured by darkness. My heart raced, and I brought my camera up instinctively, ready to capture what I believed to be a ghost. "Emily," I tried to sound calm, but my voice was shaky. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching me with an intensity that sent chills through my body. "Please, if that's you, show me, help me understand." As if on cue, the figure stepped forward, and I felt a rush of cold air envelop me. I snapped a photo, the flash illuminating her face for a split second. Her expression was haunting, sadness mixed with something darker, something that hinted at pain and loss. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure's lips moved, but no sound came out. I felt a surge of desperation. "Tell me what happened. What is your connection to this place?" I pleaded, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, and the darkness thickened. I could feel the presence of something sinister. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot, caught between fear and an overwhelming need to know the truth. "Emily," I called again, but the figure began to dissipate, fading back into the shadows. "No, don't go." I reached out, but it was too late. The room around me felt like it was closing in, the walls pulsating with a life of their own. Just then, I heard Sarah's voice in my mind again, echoing her warnings about the imaginary friend. She could be the reason for the fire, the darkness that consumed Emily. The realization hit me hard. Was this friend the entity that had haunted Emily? Was she the one who had led her to her tragic fate? I stumbled back, knocking over a small table. The toys scattered across the floor, and I felt a surge of anger mixed with sorrow. "You took her from her family," I shouted into the emptiness. "You let her burn." A gust of wind swept through the room, and I felt icy fingers brush against my cheek. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted for the door, my heart racing. But just as I reached for the handle, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Jake, don't go." I froze, turned slowly, and there she was, Emily, standing in the doorway, her face illuminated by the faint moonlight. "Emily," I breathed, feeling a mixture of relief and fear. "Help me," she whispered, her voice fragile and filled with pain. "She won't let me go." I took a step forward, my heart aching for her. "Who won't let you go?" I asked, desperate for answers. "The friend. She's angry. She wants to keep me here," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I can't leave until you find out the truth." The urgency in her words pierced my heart. What truth? What do I need to know? But before she could respond, the shadows began to swirl around her, pulling her back into darkness. "Jake, please!" she cried, and I felt a surge of panic. "No!" I shouted, lunging forward, but it was as if an invisible barrier held me back. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold air that separated us. "Emily, I'm here. I won't let you go." The shadows closed in, and I could feel the weight of despair bearing down on me. "I won't abandon you," I screamed, my voice echoing in the empty room. "Just tell me what to do." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "You have to confront her. You have to face the storm raged outside like a feral beast, the wind howling through the cracks of the ancient mansion as I stumbled through the dimly lit hallways. My heart raced as I called out for Sarah, my voice echoing off the peeling wallpaper and dusty floorboards. "Sarah, where are you?" The urgency in my tone felt foreign, as if I were not just searching for her, but for something deeper, something that lay hidden within the shadows. The air crackled with tension, a palpable energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I had felt it before, but now it was magnified, as if the very walls of the mansion were alive, whispering secrets that had long been buried. I pushed open the door to the main room, where I found her standing motionless, her gaze fixed on something beyond my sight. "Sarah!" I shouted again, but she didn't respond. Instead, her expression was one of pure terror. As I approached her, I felt a chill sweep through the room, a coldness that wrapped around me like a shroud. It was then I noticed the shadow creeping behind her, a dark figure that seemed to undulate and shift, taking on a form that was both familiar and frightening. My breath caught in my throat as the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The friend Emily had spoken of, the one that had lingered in the corners of her childhood, was here, and it was not a benign presence. "Jake," Sarah finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it. It's here." Her eyes darted to the dark figure, and I could see the fear etched across her face. "We need to get out of here." "No," I replied, a sudden resolve hardening my voice. "We can't run from this. We have to confront it." I stepped forward, my heart pounding, trying to muster the courage I felt slipping away. The shadow flickered, momentarily revealing a glimpse of the childlike form of Emily's friend. But there was something monstrous about it, as if it had been twisted by the pain it had caused. As if sensing my determination, the entity shifted, drawing closer to Sarah, who trembled at its presence. "Jake, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "It wants to hurt us." "No," I insisted, shaking my head. "It wants something. It's not just a shadow. It's feeding on fear, on the pain left behind." The words tumbled from my lips, and with each syllable, I felt a growing connection to Emily, her spirit, her pain, and the weight of the loss that had haunted me since I first stepped into this cursed house. I raised my camera, the only weapon I had against the darkness. "I'm going to capture it," I said, my voice steadying. "Maybe the light can reveal what it truly is." I focused the lens, feeling a surge of energy as I steadied my breath. "This ends now." As I pressed the shutter, a blinding flash illuminated the room, momentarily dispelling the shadows. The entity recoiled, its form shifting and contorting in the light. For a brief instant, I could see its true nature, a swirling mass of anguish and despair, a reflection of the pain that had haunted both Emily and me. The realization struck me like a lightning bolt. This creature was born from sorrow, from the tragedy that had befallen Emily, and from my own grief that I had yet to confront. "Jake!" Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts, snapping me back to reality. "It's coming for me." I turned to see her backing away from the shadow, her eyes wide with fear. The entity lunged, a rush of dark energy that crackled with malevolence. "Stay back," I shouted, raising my camera again. I needed to show her that I was here, that I wouldn't let it take her. The flash of the camera erupted once more, casting a harsh light that pushed against the darkness. The entity howled, a sound that reverberated through my bones, a pitiful cry of anguish that echoed the loss of a child, the loss of a family, and the loss of myself. "Jake, please," Sarah cried, her voice trembling with desperation. I could see the despair in her eyes, the fear that threatened to consume her. I had to give her hope, to show her that we could fight this together. "Sarah, listen to me," I shouted over the chaos. "You have to remember Emily. She's here with us. We're not alone." I felt a rush of determination as I spoke. She needs us to fight for her, to break the cycle of pain. The entity paused, its form flickering as if it were unsure of itself. I took a step forward, pushing through the fear that threatened to engulf me. "Emily," I called out, my voice steady. "We know you're here. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you." In that moment, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a ripple of energy that passed between us. The entity recoiled again, as if my words had struck a chord. With every flash of my camera, I saw glimpses of Emily, her laughter, her joy, the light that had once filled her eyes. She was not just a victim of the past. She was a reminder of the love that existed, even in the darkest of times. "Emily," I called again, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. "You have to fight this. You are stronger than the darkness. You deserve to be free." I felt a surge of warmth, a light that began to fill the space around me, pushing against the shadows that had taken root in this house. The entity writhed, a cacophony of whispers filling the air, and I could almost hear Emily's voice woven within them. "Jake, help me." It was a plea that cut through the darkness, a call for salvation that echoed my own longing for closure. With one final surge of courage, I pressed the shutter again, capturing the essence of the light that surrounded us. The flash illuminated the room, and in that moment, I saw Emily, her spirit emerging from the depths of despair, illuminated by the light I had brought forth. "Emily," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "You can let go. You're free." The room exploded with light, the shadows retreating as the entity wailed in agony. I felt a deep connection to Emily, a bond that transcended the pain we both carried. In that moment, I realized that my own grief had been intertwined with hers, a chain that bound us both. As the light grew brighter, I felt a warmth enveloping me, a sense of peace that washed over my soul. I understood now that the entity was not just a monster. It was a manifestation of the sorrow we had both endured. It was time to break the cycle, to release the pain that had held us captive for so long. "Let her go," I cried, my voice rising above the chaos. "Let us both go." The light intensified, and for a moment, I could see Emily's face, her smile breaking through the darkness that had consumed her. She was not a lost child anymore. She was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, love could prevail. The darkness began to dissolve, the entity screaming in defeat as the light enveloped Sarah and me. I felt my heart swell with emotion, the weight of my grief lifting as I finally let go of the pain I had carried for so long. I was not just fighting for Emily. I was fighting for myself, for my own redemption. As the last remnants of the shadow faded away, I felt a profound sense of clarity. The storm outside subsided, the winds calming as if nature itself had joined in our liberation. In that moment, I knew that Emily was free, that she had found peace, and that I could finally begin to heal. "Jake," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Did we do it?" I turned to her, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "We did." The warmth of the moment wrapped around us, a cocoon of light that promised a new beginning. As I looked around the once dark room, I felt Emily's presence linger, her spirit no longer trapped in the shadows. She had found her way back to the light, and in doing so, she had shown me the path to my own recovery. I understood now that love would always prevail, even in the depths of sorrow. And with that understanding, I felt ready to face the world once more, carrying with me the memories of a girl who had taught me the true meaning of healing. The air was thick with an electric tension as I stood in the decaying remnants of the mansion, the walls whispering secrets that had long been buried. My heart raced, fueled by a mix of dread and anticipation. The storm outside roared, as if echoing the turmoil within me. I felt an unmistakable pull toward the center of the room, a force that urged me to confront the darkness that loomed over Sarah and me. "Emily," I murmured, the name slipping from my lips like a chant, a prayer for clarity in the chaos. I had spent countless hours in this house, unraveling the threads of a tragedy that had ensnared not just Emily, but me as well. The weight of my own grief pressed heavily on my chest. I had been lost in the shadows of my past for too long. Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath fogging in the air. I turned to face the corner of the room, where shadows twisted and danced. It was as if the darkness had taken form, coalescing into something more sinister, something that felt all too familiar. A chill raced down my spine as I recognized the figure, the shadow of Emily's imaginary friend, the entity that had haunted my thoughts and dreams. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice firm despite the quivering in my hands. I felt the weight of the camera around my neck, a reminder of my purpose. I had to confront this creature, this embodiment of dread. And then, as if answering my command, the shadow shifted and took on a more defined shape. The air crackled with energy as it morphed into a silhouette, a grotesque parody of a child, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. "You shouldn't have come back," it hissed, the voice a low, echoing whisper that resonated in the depths of my mind. "You cannot save her. Emily is not yours to keep," I retorted, my voice steadying as I stepped closer. "Your grip on her is over. I won't let you take anyone else." The shadow recoiled, its form flickering between dimensions, as if the light from my camera was pushing it back. I felt a surge of determination. "You thrive on pain and despair, but I won't let you manipulate that any longer. You are nothing but a manifestation of grief, a parasite feeding on the sorrow of a family torn apart." The entity laughed, a sound that echoed with the weight of 1,000 memories, memories that had haunted me since the day my life was shattered. "You think you understand grief? You don't know the depths of despair, the darkness that lingers when a child is lost. You think you're saving her? You're merely prolonging the inevitable." I gritted my teeth, the pain of my own loss bubbling to the surface. "I know loss. I've drowned in it, but I refuse to let it define me or anyone else ever again." My heart thudded in my chest, and I raised my camera, aiming it at the shadow. The flash burst forth, illuminating the room in a blinding light. The entity shrieked, a cacophony of anguish that filled the space around me. Its form began to distort, twisting and writhing in the light. I could feel my own pain, my grief over losing my wife, surfacing as I faced this creature. "You're trapped in your own sorrow, just like I was," I shouted over its cries. "But I've found my way back. I've learned to let go." As the light from my camera enveloped the room, a warmth spread through me, mingling with the grief I had carried for so long. It was as if the light was purging my sorrow, allowing the memories of my wife to surface without the burden of guilt. In that moment, I felt a connection, a bond forged in our shared experiences of loss. "Emily," I called, my voice finding its strength. "You don't have to stay trapped in this darkness. You can be free." The shadow writhed, and in its place, I saw a glimpse of Emily, her small frame, her bright smile, shining through the murky depths. "Jake," she whispered, her voice sweet and innocent. "Help me?" My heart ached at the sound of her name. "I'm here, Emily. I'm here to help you." The entity shrieked again, but this time it was a sound of desperation, a plea for the power it had lost. "You cannot have her. She belongs to me. Emily belongs to herself," I countered, my resolve hardening. "And it's time for you to let her go." I took a deep breath, focusing on the warmth in my heart, the love I still held for my wife, and the memories of Emily that had come to life through my lens. "This ends now," I shouted, lifting my camera once more. With a final burst of light, I pressed the shutter. The room exploded into brilliance, and for a moment, everything felt suspended in time. I could see the shadows retreating, the figure of the entity dissolving into tendrils of darkness. And then, amid the chaos, I caught sight of Emily. She stood before me, her expression a mixture of fear and hope, her eyes wide and glistening. "Please, don't let her take me," she pleaded, her small voice trembling. I stepped forward, feeling the gravity of the moment. "You are not alone, Emily. You're stronger than this darkness. As I reached out to her, a wave of warmth washed over me, and I felt the weight of my own grief begin to lift. You deserve to be free. You deserve to live, to laugh, to be a child. Jake, she whispered again, and I could see a glimmer of her spirit breaking through the shadows that had ensnared her. I'm scared. It's okay to be scared, I said softly, my heart aching for her. But you don't have to face this alone anymore. You have the power to break free. With that, the warmth enveloped me completely, and I felt the presence of my wife beside me, a gentle reminder of love and support. Let go of your pain, Jake, she seemed to say, her voice echoing in my heart. Let it all go. In that moment, I understood. The entity was a reflection of my own sorrow, a manifestation of the grief I had failed to confront. I had been holding on to my pain, allowing it to consume me, just as it had with Emily. It was time to break the cycle. Emily, I said, my voice steadier now, you are loved and you are free. You have to let go of the darkness. Find your light. With a final surge of energy, I focused all my will on Emily, channeling every ounce of love and acceptance I had for her. The light from my camera intensified, illuminating the room with a brilliance that chased away the shadows. Let her go, I shouted, and the darkness began to dissolve, pulled away by the light. Jake, Emily cried, her small hands reaching for me. I'm scared. I'm right here, I assured her, stepping forward with every ounce of strength I had. I won't leave you. We'll face this together. As the shadows thinned, I could see her more clearly, her features softening, her smile breaking through the fear. I'm ready, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. With one final flash, the light exploded, and I felt a rush of warmth enveloping me, washing away the pain and despair that had clung to me for far too long. In that moment, I let go of my grief, embracing the memories of my wife and the love I had for Emily. The entity screamed one last time, a sound of pure rage, before it vanished, consumed by the light. And then silence. As the brilliance faded, I stood alone in the room, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. I turned, half expecting to see Emily standing there, her bright smile lighting up the darkness. But instead, I felt a presence beside me, a soft warmth that enveloped me like a gentle embrace. And for the first time since losing my wife, I felt whole again. Thank you, a voice whispered, and I turned to see Emily standing before me, her form radiant and free from the shadows. You did it. You saved me. I knelt down, tears streaming down my face as I looked into her eyes. No, Emily, you saved us both. She smiled, a beaming light that filled the room. I can finally go home. And in that moment, I realized that she was right. She was free, and so was I. As her spirit began to fade, I felt a lightness in my heart, the weight of my grief lifting. Goodbye, Emily. I will always remember you. Goodbye, Jake, she called back, her voice echoing softly. Thank you for letting me go. With that, she vanished, leaving behind a warm glow that illuminated the mansion. I was left standing in the silence, the weight of the world no longer heavy on my shoulders. I had confronted my grief, faced the darkness that had haunted me, and emerged stronger. I could finally see the path ahead, one filled with hope and light. I knew that it was time to carry the memories of my wife and Emily in my heart, allowing them to guide me toward a future where